Cyclone Amphan makes landfall in northeast India and Bangladesh. The first super cyclone since 1999 has already forced the evacuation of millions of citizens and is expected to cause catastrophic damage to the region. During her inaugural speech, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen says she will not accept China's definition of one country, two systems. This as China continues to seek to isolate Taiwan from the rest of the world. And over 1,100 COVID-19 deaths in Brazil in 24 hours. Latin America's hardest hit country becomes the third most infected nation worldwide, but President Jair Bolsonaro downplays the risks. Hello and welcome to the France 24 newsroom. Thank you for joining us for this edition. Cyclone Amphan has made landfall in India and Bangladesh with powerful winds of up to 170 kilometers per hour lashing the coastline. Millions of people have been evacuated from territories to the north of the Bay of Bengal. Evacuations which were made difficult by the ongoing coronavirus crisis. Amphan, the first super cyclone since 1999, is expected to cause deadly floods and storms in the coming days. There has already been one victim. Thomas Waterhouse reports.
It brewed for days over the Bay of Bengal, but now it's hit. Waves pound the promenade of this Indian seaside town as one of the fiercest cyclones in years rears its head. The storm's powerful winds have already battered mangrove forests, with many trees falling victim. While motorists and cyclists have ventured out, braving the deluge. This deadly weather system made landfall on Wednesday along this huge stretch of shoreline between the West Bengal town of Digha and Hatia Island in Bangladesh. These satellite images captured by NASA show the ferocious swirls in red, orange and yellow as the cyclone slowed slightly as it reached cooler coastal waters. As locals clubbed together to build walls of sandbags to limit the effects of the storm surge, in Satkhira district, volunteers and police officers have wrestled with fishing boats in a frantic race to bring evacuees to safety.
এখন বর্তমানে অনেক মানুষ তারা পানির স্ফীতি দেখে তারা আতঙ্কিত হয়ে তারা ঘর ছেড়ে সাইক্লোন শেল্টারে গিয়েছে এবং ইতিমধ্যে আমাদের ইউনিয়ন পরিষদ এবং প্রশাসন থেকে তাদেরকে শুকনা খাবারের ব্যবস্থা করেছে এবং প্রত্যেকটা ইউনিয়ন পরিষদে তাদের জন্য খাবারের রান্নাবান্না হচ্ছে.
Another official has described the situation as being a double whammy, with authorities battling the devastating effects of this cyclone as well as those of the COVID-19 pandemic. And with millions now sleeping in temporary accommodation to avoid the heavy winds and rains like these, maintaining social distancing rules is proving problematic.
No, we will not accept the label of one country, two systems. That was the message put forward by Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen during her inauguration as the island country's new president. Re-elected in a landslide win, Tsai has called for increased cooperation but refuted Beijing's claims that Taiwan was a part of China. Her attitude has for many years angered authorities in Beijing who have sought to isolate the island nation from the rest of the world, including by barring its access to global organizations such as the UN and WHO. Well, to tell us more about the current tensions between both nations, we are joined by our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, thank you very much for joining us live on the program. A defiant inauguration speech by Taiwan's president, and predictably, it hasn't gone down well in Beijing.
No, it hasn't gone down well in Beijing. But, you know, Beijing won't have been particularly surprised, I'm sure, by the inauguration speech made by President Tsai. You know, after all, she's been president since 2016, newly re-elected, as you pointed out, in a landslide election, and elected on the policies that so irritate Beijing. She's made it clear all along that, you know, the one country, two systems is just not an option as far as Taiwan is concerned. She and the majority of the people of Taiwan have looked at the experience of Hong Kong where that experiment has been carried out for the last 2 decades. And they've seen over the last year or so that it hasn't worked well. So, if China was trying to advertise the one country, two systems, it's done a pretty bad job of it. So there'll be no surprise, I think, in Beijing that the Taiwanese are not jumping to accept that idea. That said, it should be pointed out that this wasn't an aggressive speech by President Tsai. She called for dialogue. She said peace was the only way forward, but she wasn't backing down on the key issues. She spoke about parity. The whole notion of parity to the Chinese is simply anathema. The idea that Taiwan and China are two equals, to them sounds ridiculous. As far as they're concerned, Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, end of story. So they won't have been happy when the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo sent a congratulatory message to President Tsai, hailing her courage and her vision in developing Taiwan's democracy. A lot of anger on the part of the Chinese already. The Global Times saying that, there will be no separation. If it comes to a trial of strength, there can only be one winner.
Well, now China managed to block the discussion of Taiwan's possible membership of the World Health Organization earlier this week. Yet it's Taiwan's coronavirus response, Rob, that has won rare praise from the international body.
Yes, I'm absolutely right. There was a certain amount of disappointment, I think, on the part of the Taiwanese that China essentially got its way at the Assembly of the World Health Organization earlier this week. It wasn't on the agenda. Taiwan had its arm twisted behind its back by its allies not to embarrass them at this meeting. They obviously felt it wouldn't go through. The Chinese would just stop it. But there's no doubt that at the same time, Taiwan has been getting all the health plaudits at the same time that China has been getting all the criticism, in particular, of course, from the United States, who holds it largely responsible for the coronavirus and its spread throughout the United States, with Donald Trump even calling for reparations from the Chinese. But whereas China's response has been opaque, cautious, and some would say dishonest, Taiwan's response has been enormously successful. Population of 24 million, only 440 positive cases of the virus, and only 7 deaths, no cases in the last 3 weeks or so. Taiwan was very, very quick to respond to the coronavirus, shutting down its borders on the 31st of December, very fast with testing, very fast with phone apps to trace people who have been identified as having the virus. So it's getting a lot of praise at the same time that it's feeling the frustration of not having been accepted into the WHO.
Rob Parsons, our chief foreign editor, thank you very much for that analysis. Thank you. It has been a dark 24 hours in Brazil, with 1,179 official deaths recorded by Brazilian authorities in relation to the coronavirus. The first time the daily death toll has surpassed the ton mark. Infections continue to spike, with the health system in many major cities close to collapse. Brazil, already the most infected country in South America, now has the 3rd biggest outbreak worldwide. Despite the current situation, President Jair Bolsonaro has downplayed the risks of the crisis and appealed to the population to use the unproven drug hydrochloroquine as a remedy to the virus.
Freshly dug graves dot the landscape of Brazil's biggest city. Sao Paulo state has been the worst hit by the outbreak, accounting for more than a quarter of the country's deaths, which are now hovering around 18,000, according to health ministry figures. Local officials warn the pandemic's destruction may be just beginning, with the peak expected in June.
Estamos perdendo essa batalha contra o vírus. Essa é a realidade. O vírus, nesse momento, está vencendo a guerra.
As health experts sound the alarm and hospitals in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro near capacity, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro continues to downplay the virus. He's pushed to end lockdown measures so as to minimize economic disruption. And his government is set to issue new guidelines expanding the recommended use of chloroquine. Like his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, Bolsonaro has hailed the anti-malarial drug as a potential treatment against COVID-19, despite studies casting doubts on its effectiveness and safety. Bolsonaro's coronavirus policies have sparked tensions in his cabinet, prompting 2 health ministers to resign in the span of just 1 month. Brazil now has more than 270,000 infections, the 3rd highest in the world, behind the U.S. and Russia.
There has been another 161 fatalities in Italy related to the virus, a drop of just 1 in comparison to Tuesday. As Italy continues to relax social restrictions, medical experts believe that most of the victims currently are now very elderly citizens. For now, Italy still has the 3rd highest death toll in the world, but new cases and the number of people carrying the virus continue to drop massively. The Civil Protection Agency has said that close to 2.5 million people have been tested in recent weeks. Italy has a population of 60 million. The pandemic has shown the importance of the textile industry, which is critical for the production of PPE. In parts of eastern France, some 30 businesses specialised in luxury products have begun producing face masks and lab coats. Will these companies also bring back some of the mass production, which is now undertaken in Asia and North Africa? And would it be profitable? Karina Chabour and Wassim Cornet have the answers.
This is Docelle in eastern France, home to one of the last French companies that still make personal protective equipment, or PPE.
On produit environ 10 000 prototypes ou échantillons par an. Ces prototypes alimentent notre production qui est basée en Tunisie, où là on va fabriquer à peu près 2,5 millions de pièces par an.
But because of the coronavirus pandemic, the Tunisian plant was forced to shut down. At the French factory, 20 seamstresses were able to produce 60,000 masks and coats for healthcare workers at a time when PPE was severely lacking. But the head of the company says it would be hard to relocate production.
Si on devait réindustrialiser ce produit en France, on devrait le vendre deux fois et demi plus cher. Et ça, c'est lié en fait au fait que la main-d'œuvre est une part importante de la valeur ajoutée sur ce type de produit. Est-ce qu'on est prêt à accepter de payer 2 fois à 2 fois et demi plus cher ce type de produit?
Another problem is finding qualified workers.
Ça nécessite un savoir-faire. Il faut plusieurs années pour bien maîtriser toutes les opérations. Et aujourd'hui, on ne trouve plus ces compétences.
Up until the 1960s, the industry employed some 50,000 people. Today, only 3,000 remain.
Derrière ces bois, vous avez des usines entières qui alimentaient une grosse partie de la consommation française et qui, avec la mondialisation, ont disparu.
Only 30 specialized businesses in the area remain in operation.
Notre métier traditionnel, les nappes et les produits finis.
Customers and shops were forced to close because of the pandemic. This company decided to produce masks to lessen the economic blow.
On n'a pas vocation à faire des masques en gros volume. Si on garde la production de masques, c'est pour proposer des masques personnalisés, notamment à la restauration, à l'hôtellerie.
The company may soon decide to invest in the development of an antibacterial fabric, which could rival with foreign production.
And finally from us, the United Kingdom has released its daily COVID-19 figures, with the death toll rising to 35,704 overall. That's an increase of 363 in the past 24 hours. The United Kingdom remains the second hardest hit country in the world by the crisis, with the government facing a lot of criticism on how they handled the outbreak. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has promised that a track and trace system to help with dealing with the outbreak will be available on June 1st. Well, that's all the news we have for now. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back in 15 minutes or so. Bye-bye.